Gojo Satoru is one of the two most broken characters in Jujutsu Kaisen. With the Limitless technique and the 6 eyes, he's a near unbeatable opponent for any individual that faces him. But what about every individual? All 50 plus sorcerers in the series, can they beat him if they work together? And can they beat him without Sukuna? I do want to talk about Sukuna later, but for now, let's take him out of the picture. The dude just skews the balance way too much, like putting LeBron on an Olympic basketball team. Oh wait, plus I think it's far more interesting without him, and I think the sorcerers might still be able to win. There are 3 main issues the rest of the cast needs to address if they want to beat Gojo. First is obviously Infinity. Infinity is like 80% of what makes Gojo broken. Sure, the rest of Limitless is good, but compared to Infinity, it's more like an opening act than the main feature. Infinity basically gives Gojo an impenetrable force field. It forces anything that comes in contact with Infinity to be slowed down the closer it gets to Gojo. So while it doesn't technically outright stop things from reaching Gojo, they move so slow that they will never actually reach him. Gojo can also seemingly manipulate the space which he controls Infinity over, as we see the Bagman in hidden inventories get caught in Infinity at a further distance than he usually applies the ability at. This also insinuates that Infinity is the reason he can just kind of float around and was also used to throw the bridge at Sukuna, but this was never actually confirmed. Fans just kind of assume it's the case because it's the most logical explanation. Like, what else would it be? Just his pure aura? I'm not 100% sold on these being Infinity, but I also don't know what else they would be. To be most fair, I think it's best to only evaluate Infinity as a defensive ability, as the implications of the bridge and hovering being related to Infinity just make the ability really hard to judge. So how did the sorcerers get through Infinity? Well, there are a number of options. The first and most clear is with a curse tool that allows the user to bypass it. We see this with the Black Rope and of course the Inverted Spear of Heaven. The Black Rope has the ability to disrupt and cancel curse techniques, but the more it is used, the more it is destroyed. So it's not a great option here because the battle against Gojo would likely be drawn out. The Inverted Spear of Heaven, on the other hand, nullifies any curse technique it comes in contact with. This of course includes the Limitless technique, and it is the only curse tool we have seen successfully damage Gojo. But there's still an issue here. Neither of these curse tools seem to exist in the world of Jujutsu anymore. The Black Rope was destroyed when it was used to fight Gojo, and no more of it exists in Africa. And the Inverted Spear of Heaven disappeared after Gojo got his hands on it, so that's out of the question too. Or at least the original is. There is a potential workaround to this issue. Sorcerers with the construction technique can sacrifice themselves to create cursed tools. We saw this done by Yozuru to create a replica of Kamotoke, and Mai to create a replica of the Soul Split Katana. As I'm sure you can tell, both of these were replicas of other cursed tools, so I don't think making a replica of the Inverted Spear of Heaven is completely out of the question. But they might not need to, as there are other options to get through Infinity, such as Domain Amplification. Domain Amplification essentially allows the user to push their own domain past their body, and reduce the effects of any curse techniques they come in contact with. The reason I say reduce the effects rather than nullify is because domain amplification doesn't work on powerful techniques such as red or blue, but it does work to get through Infinity, as we see in Shibuya and against Sukuna. The only issue is that only Kenjaku knows this technique if Sukuna isn't involved. Everyone else who we see use this technique are cursed spirits who are not being taken into account today, but Kenjaku did teach domain amplification to everyone that knew it, so he's obviously very proficient in the technique himself, and he could probably also teach it to others if need be. It just depends how much prep time they have and how busy he is getting back shots from Yuji's dad. Another option to get through Infinity is Mahoraga, but Mahoraga isn't a great option here either, as it takes 4 adaptations before it can actually get through Infinity, and in this case, Mahoraga would be coming from Megumi, whose interpretation was substantially weaker than Sukuna's. It would also require Megumi essentially sacrificing himself near Gojo, which is not exactly easy, as Megumi cannot die before starting the taming or it doesn't work, and it also means sacrificing one of the already limited domain expansions just for a chance to get through Infinity. And the last way to get through Infinity is by forcing Gojo into technique burnout. But before we get into that, please subscribe. We are rapidly closing in on 100,000 subscribers. So to those who are already subscribed, I just wanted to say thank you so much for the support so far. And if you're not subscribed, what are you waiting for? Only 30,000 more people on the entire planet will be able to say they were here before 100K. Don't you want to be one of them? Well, the opportunity is slipping away fast, so sub now, before it's too late. Forcing Gojo into technique burnout can only be done if Gojo opens his domain and then closes it, so it's not a great option either, because Gojo's domain is actually the second issue the sorcerers have to deal with. Here's the thing about Infinite Void. Without Sukuna in play, there's no one that has a domain equal to Gojo's. This means if he opens his domain, anyone that gets caught in it will pretty much be guaranteed to die, and he can open his domain to the same size as Sukuna's, so it has an incredibly large radius as well. As if that wasn't enough, Gojo can open Infinite Void incredibly fast too, meaning meaning if the sorcerers don't prepare and position correctly, a lot of people could die. Beating Infinite Void is a monstrous task, and to be honest, I don't know if there actually is a good way to beat it. The best way I could think of is to send one person with their own domain in to try and force Gojo to open his to contest theirs, therefore pushing him into burnout once he beats the person and the domain is forced to close. The issue with this strat though is that the sorcerers that have domains are some of the strongest characters in the series, so no matter what, it will take a large loss to actually make even a bit of progress. This is also assuming Gojo actually uses his own domain to contest his opponents, which is not 100% guaranteed to happen. If the gap in strength is wide enough, I can totally see Gojo just hashing it out in the opponent's domain, which would be pretty bad for the protagonists as it means losing a domain and not forcing Gojo into burnout. It might be best to send some supporting sorcerers in with the main domain opener in order to put some pressure onto Gojo, but no matter what, forcing Gojo into burnout is the first step. Even from here though, there's not a great solution. Here's the thing, Gojo can just heal his brain to fix burnout, so even if a bunch of people jump Gojo while he's in burnout, he can just heal his brain and get his technique back in seconds, putting everyone at risk right then and there. The other option is to only send a few people once he's in burnout so he doesn't feel as pressured to restore his brain, giving them more time to fight him while he's in burnout. But in this case, the sorcerers would probably have way less firepower. The thing is though, even if the sorcerers can get through Infinity and Infinite Void, just his cursed energy is threatening. This is the third issue by the way, I just couldn't figure out how to make a transition work here. That shit stopped Jogo and Hanami like a clear door stops a cat. If curses as strong as these two are struggling to get through Gojo's cursed energy, then 90% of the cast will be unable to get through it either. The cursed energy itself is also great for offense, which is pretty terrifying to think about. I mean, Hanami got crushed by it and it destroyed a concrete wall, meaning just his cursed energy has the power of a post-Taco Bell shit. That being said, there are definitely characters that can survive his cursed energy, like Hikari and Yuta, who have been confirmed to survive a hit from him which was with blue, so just his cursed energy shouldn't be too much for them on offense or defense. There are also a number of characters that have taken black flashes from Sukuna and dealt damage back to him, such as Yuji, Maki, and sort of Kusakabe, so I'd say they have a decent chance of being relatively unaffected by Gojo's cursed energy as well. All three of these issues combine to form a bigger fourth problem. There are very few sorcerers that can actually fulfill all of these requirements. Here's the throbbing problem. Even if we put every single sorcerer against Gojo, the bottom 2/3 are going to be pure fodder, if not more. They're not going to be able to do anything individually, let alone as a group. Their best use, and I'm not joking, is to be used to create a cursed energy camouflage like the flyheads Toji used. That's how much weaker they are than Gojo. They might as well just be flyheads to him. Even super strong sorcerers like Hikari, Yuta, and Uraume struggle to take just one punch from Gojo, so there's really no one individually that could stand up to him, which should be obvious. That's why we're putting everyone against him. But if we combine some abilities and use some sneaky sly tactics, then they should be able to potentially have a chance. There are a few routes we can go. First and foremost, Mai is being sacked to make an inverted Spear of Heaven no matter what route we take. She's just too weak to be of use in any other way, like at all. Even as a distraction or fodder, she might as well not exist because her cursed energy is so weak it won't really help to create camouflage. Plus, the sorcerers really need the inverted spear to pose any threat to Gojo, and Yozuru is a way more useful sorcerer in pretty much every way. So sorry Mai, maybe be more useful next time if you don't want to get turned into a weapon. The next question is which sorcerer do we give the spear to, and the answer to this should also be obvious. Kenjaku. Yeah, I think Kenjaku is the better choice over Maki for a couple of reasons. First of all, experience. The dude has been fighting for over 1,000 years, and not only that, he's actually fought other sorcerers with the Limitless and Six Eyes before. He lost, but he still has experience in the fight which no one else does. On top of this, Gege himself said Kenjaku is the second best at hand-to-hand combat behind only Gojo, so he's quite literally the best for the job. The thing about Kenjaku though, is even as an individual, he still gets far outscaled by Gojo, as we saw when Gojo was unsealed and Kenny had legitimate fear in his eyes when he got confronted. The dude knows he can't beat Gojo on his own, but if he had a good team backing him up, things change a bit. But what exactly makes a good team? Well, he needs support in a number of different ways. First of all, a cursed speech user to try and disrupt Gojo's movements, making him easier to hit with the inverted Spear of Heaven. This could be done by having the sorcerer there physically or by using the radio technique. He's also going to need someone to distract Gojo in combat to create an opening, which is a nearly impossible job, meaning that it would likely need to be a special grade or two. I would send in Yuki and at least some fodder like Ino and the Kyoto students. To be honest, this amount of fodder probably isn't enough, and it will take many more sorcerers to fully obscure Kenjaku with the inverted Spear of Heaven from the Six Eyes, if it's even possible. The only time we saw the spear be successfully obscured was against Teen Gojo while he was extremely worn out, so there's a good chance that adult adult Gojo in good condition is even more perceptive to threats like the spear. There's also the chance that Gojo opens his domain once he senses the weird cursed energy that accompanies the spear, and this would be pretty terrible since that means Kenjaku would get killed in Infinite Void along with Yuki. So not only would the Sorcerers lose two of their strongest fighters, they would also give Gojo the inverted Spear of Heaven, giving him a surprisingly good defensive tool for curse technique burnout, as the nullifying effects of the weapon work on techniques used on the blade as well. Another potential route to victory is forcing Gojo's domain to close from the outside and then fighting him there, as it could allow Sorcerers in the domain to at least survive and catch Gojo off guard. There are a couple of candidates that I think would be good for the role of destroying Gojo's domain from the outside. Yozuru and Kashimo come to mind immediately. Yozuru for Perfect Sphere, which should be able to break the barrier since it exerts infinite pressure, and Kashimo for his electrical discharge, which seems to be incredibly powerful, as it almost killed the unkillable gambling addict. These, of course, would be one-time strategies, as Gojo can change the conditions of his barrier to make the outside harder than normal, preventing destruction of the outside to an extent. Mainly though, if someone does destroy the barrier from the outside, he would 100% signal out that person to kill them because they pose a large threat. But if they can get Gojo into technique burnout, they gotta throw the whole kitchen sink at him. No, actually not just the kitchen sink, the whole kitchen, the whole house, if we're being honest. I'm talking Maximum Uzumaki, the Black Hole, Perfect Sphere, Mystic Beast Amber, Mahoraga, Bird Strike. Literally every attack that does major damage needs to be launched because they only have a couple of seconds before he recovers his technique. As I'm sure you can tell, there's not really a great option to beat Gojo without Sukuna, except one. Takiba. Takiba is a complete and utter wildcard when it comes to Jujutsu. His technique essentially lets anything he finds funny happen. Now, I'm not going to go down the whole dark humor Takiba route because that's just not realistic. What is realistic though is Takiba being a real nuisance to Gojo. Because Takiba doesn't find death or pain funny, he is essentially immortal. He can't die because he doesn't find it funny to die, and he can't be seriously hurt either for the same reason. On top of this, his ability can completely warp reality to fit any scenario he finds funny, as we saw in his fight against Kenjaku. This means he could theoretically get past infinity if he doesn't think infinity is funny. He could also theoretically give us shirtless Gojo since Gege never did. At the very least, he would be able to fill the same role he did in the Kenjaku fight, where he essentially exists to be a distraction for someone else to deal the final blow to Gojo, which ironically enough would probably be Kenjaku himself. But I'm not entirely sure how this would work. Either Kenjaku waits until Takiba is done like Yuta did and then attacks, or he infiltrates Takiba's reality manipulation. The issue with the first option though is once Takiba is done, there's nothing stopping the Six Eyes from detecting him or stopping Gojo from reactivating Infinity or using Infinite Void. The issue with the second option is if Kenjaku enters the reality shift, there's an element of randomness that could expose him. Not only that, but even if Gojo gets stabbed by the spear while reality is being altered, he still won't die because Takiba doesn't find it funny. The likely answer is that Kenjaku would have to strike at the exact same second that the reality bending ends, as that would be before the Six Eyes could detect him, but after the risk of being exposed is diminished. Even this isn't the most sound plan, but honestly, I think relying on Takiba to get the job done is one of the better options the protagonists have here. There's really no good option for them without Sukuna. Now, if Sukuna is in the mix with the other sorcerers, this becomes a complete blowout. As much as I hate to say it, give the dude 2 inverted Spear of Heavens and let him get to work. With 4 arms, he could slice and dice with the spears while also chanting for the world slash, all while being supported by people like Yuta and Inumaki, who can disrupt Gojo's movements using cursed speech. Sukuna can also obviously contest Gojo's domain, which neutralizes it, allowing others to enter the domain without fearing Infinite Void or getting slashed to hell, making Gojo's domain kind of a non-issue while also forcing him to use it. It becomes even more one-sided if Takiba gets involved too, but even without the crackhead comedian, Sukuna should pretty easily win with any amount of support. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, thank you so much for watching. It truly does mean the world to me. Maybe consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you in a few days for our next video.